Hey guys, welcome back to GuitarAnimal.com. I'm Trent. Today I'm going to go over my second video in this series on music theory. I would direct you to watch the first video in my series at our website because this video really comes to you feeling that you understand everything that was in the first video. So you really need to know that information before you look at this video. So if you haven't looked at video number 1 yet, I encourage you to go back and look at it. It's some of the basics, terminology, and things that we're going to be using in this video today, and it will really help you get through this video. I also recommend that you go to GuitarAnimal.com and use our looper function while watching this video, as I'm going through a lot of information on this video, and I find that the looper function will really help you guys out absorbing this. Don't feel that you have to go through this entire video and keep up with it. It's rather fast-paced. It's a lot of information, really more of a lecture on this. And I want to make sure that you guys are comfortable with it as we step through it. So if you understand the first few things that I present in this video, the middle and the end of the video will be a lot easier to grasp. So again, GuitarAnimal.com, use the looper function. It may take you a couple weeks to get through this, and that's perfectly okay. And don't forget, check out the first video in our series before attempting this video. I hope you enjoy this. So first thing we're going to talk about is how to build major scales in this video. Now major scales, you might say, well, I don't really want to jam out of major scales. They don't sound that cool to me. But they are the basis for all the major keys, all the minor keys, and are also the basis for all the chords that we play. So it's very important that you have a good grasp of major scales. So we're going to talk today about how to build major scales. I'm going to talk about all the details, and then I will have a couple other videos that we can use to actually walk you through all of the major scales that are available and take you step by step through each one of those so you won't get lost. So I'm not sure that you'd be able to just write out major scales after watching this video, but I will have videos after this one to help you get through each one of the major scales. So keep in mind, you can go to GuitarAnimal.com. I really recommend it for this video, so you can set loop points and go over all of the information that I'm covering today. There's a lot of information, and it's probably going to feel very fast for you, so never fear. GuitarAnimal.com has you covered. Go there, set loop points, watch each one of the sections of this video as many times as you need to. All right, first thing we're going to do is we're not going to learn the major scales on the fingerboard yet. We're just going to learn them theoretically. How are they laid out and what is their spacing? So these are basics, so keep in mind we're just getting into this information. First thing, there are 7 different natural notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and each one of those notes need to be represented in every major scale. Now some of them may be sharped or flatted, but we still have a representation for each one of those notes. In other words, every major scale has to have an A, a B, a C, a D, an E, an F, and a G. Again, some of these might be sharped or flatted, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But for right now, you just need to know that we have to have all of those notes represented in our major scale. All those notes will also appear in alphabetical order. All right, once we get to G, we would start over again at A, but it's always going to be in that sequence. So we're not going to mix the sequence of the notes, always in alphabetical order. The notes are all spaced in every major scale in the exact same pattern. The pattern for the major scale is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Or if you're counting the notes as numbers, 1 through 8, which 1 and 8 would be the same note, starting on A, ending on A, starting on C, ending on C, the half steps would fall between the 3rd and 4th notes and between the 7th and 8th notes. This is a very important thing to understand, so make sure you grasp this. If you need to stop the video here and rewind, check it out again, go ahead and do that. Again, half steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, whole steps between everything else. Now, some of you might not know what a whole step or a half step is. The first video did cover it somewhat, but I'll cover it again here. On your guitar, for example, the 3rd fret on your 6th string is a G note. The 5th fret is an A note. These 2 notes are considered a whole step apart because they have a note between them. So whole steps have a note between them. Or in other words, there are 2 frets physically here, the 3rd fret and the 4th fret, and that gives us a whole step spacing. Now, a half step, for example, the 7th fret of the 6th string is a B, the 8th fret is a C. And those 2 notes are a half step apart. They're right next to each other, or there is 1 fret between them. So the difference between a whole step and a half step has 1 fret between the 2 notes, and a whole step has 2 frets. Or there's a note between 2 notes that are spaced as a whole step, and there is no note between the two notes that are spaced a half step apart. Make sure that you have those down as well, whole steps and half steps. So again, our pattern for major scale is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. All major scales will have this spacing. All right, so if we're going to write out, and again, on this video, there'll be a lot of notes in the margins of the video that you can watch, and so make sure you take a look at those. Again, you can stop the video, write some things down. I do encourage that. Take some notes on this video. So the first scale that we want to lay out, major scale, would be the C major scale, and it's all natural notes. So it's basically starting on C and playing C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. When you play these notes in the sequence, the natural half steps E and F and B and C will fall between the 3 and the 4 and between the 7th and the 8th. So the C major scale is all natural notes, no sharps, no flats. All right? The next major scale I want to talk to you about is the G major scale. Now the G major scale starts on G, ends on G, but it's not all natural notes. If you're playing all natural notes from G to G, and I'll just play them here, that's G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's not a major scale. The 7th note is flatted, and it just doesn't work for our major scale pattern. Major scale pattern has to have the half step between 7 and 8, not between 6 and 7. So if I play it corrected, that's a G major scale, and what I had to do is I had to sharp the F note. That was the 7th note in the scale, and I'm playing it as an F sharp. So the G major scale contains one sharp, whereas the C major scale does not contain any sharps. Again, that's to maintain our spacing of half steps between 3 and 4 and half steps between 7 and 8. All right, we'll get back into this when we're going to write these in the next video. I'll lead you through each one of these and you will understand thoroughly. Right now we're just introducing the information to you, so hang tight. All right, now as we begin each one of these major scales that we're going to write with a different natural note, we start with a B or start with a D or an A or an E, these natural half steps between E and F and B and C are falling in different spots in our scale. We're using sharps or flats to make these group of notes match the scale pattern that we want. Whole step, half, whole step, half. Or let's move those half steps over to columns 3 and 4 and columns 7 and 8. So as we start with different notes, we will have to use varying amounts of sharps or flats to create our major scales. We will not be mixing sharps and flats in the same scale. Certain scales require sharps, other scales require flats. And we'll get through those in the next video. I'll go through a video with all the sharp scales and another video with all the flat scales and lay these out for you, and I think that will make sense once you see that video. All right, so again, varying amounts of sharps and flats in each one of these scales that we're going to be playing. Now, there are 15 different major scales, all right? But there are only 12 different tones on the guitar. So what we have is at the bottom what's called the circle of fifths. I will introduce that to you here at the end of the video. You'll see a picture of the circle of fifths, and this is basically a graphic representation of all of these notes and all of this information in a picture that's easy to see. Although when you first look at it, it might seem a little hairy. I will explain it more later. So we have certain scales that are enharmonic. That means that they sound exactly the same. They have all different notes in them or different note names, but the tones are the same. And this is because we only have 12 tones that we can play, but we have 15 different scales because we continue to add sharps to our scales until we can't add any more sharps. In other words, everything is sharp, or we continue to add flats until everything is flatted and we can't add any more flats. So we do have some overlap at the bottom of the circle of fifths, and you'll be able to see that in the picture, and we'll talk more about that in detail as we do all of the sharp scales and all of the flat scales. All right, these enharmonic scales are not a big deal because typically one is favored over the other almost every time, and again I'll explain what the thought process is there, but I do want you to know that they do exist. I've seen some videos where people will tell you that C sharp major doesn't exist or C flat major doesn't exist. This is not really true. They do exist. You just don't see them very often because there's an enharmonic equivalent to that scale which sounds the same but is a little bit easier to deal with because you're not dealing with so many sharps or so many flats. All right, so far so good. When we're going to arrange these major scales on a circle of fifths, we start off with the C at the top, which has no sharps or no flats, we will move to the right side of the circle and down, adding sharps until we can no longer add any more sharps. So we'll go to a G major scale, which has 1 sharp, a D major scale, which would have 2 sharps, C major scale has 3 sharps. We will continue adding sharps until we get to the C major scale, C sharp major scale rather, which has all sharps. All 7 notes are sharp. Now this makes sense because if we play C major and it's all natural notes, and I want to keep my spacing of the scale exactly the same, which is the goal in this exercise. If I sharp the first note from C to C sharp, I would have to sharp every note in the scale to maintain the spacing I originally had. So C major is all natural notes, no sharps. C sharp major is all sharps. Everything is sharp. And it maintains the spacing of whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. The same is true when we go the opposite direction on the circle where we are adding flats. We start off with C, which is all naturals, and then we go to F, which has 1 flat, B major, which has 2 flats, and we continue to add flats until we get to C flat major, which is all flatted for the same reasoning. If I have a C major scale and it's all naturals, I want to keep my spacing the same. I flat the first note of the scale. I have to flat all notes of the scale. And that follows suit with what we did with C sharp. Again, you don't see C flat major very often because we usually use the enharmonic equivalent to that scale, which again we'll talk about in a future video. All right, these major scales are the basis for all the major keys. The difference between a major scale and a major key, a major scale would be the 7 different notes resolving on an 8th tone, 1 octave higher than the first tone we started on. A major key will start with this major scale, but then it includes everything I can build with the notes in that scale. All other scales and all chords I can build with it. So it gives us a palette of chords and a scale that work well together, and that gives us a tonality for a particular key. And we'll get into that when we start talking composition and using some of these chords. I do have chords in a key laid out in a separate video, and you can start practicing them now, and we will tie that to the theory videos in the future. All right, so the major scales are the basis for all chords, major and minor chords, the basis for all scales, all modal scales, minor pentatonics, major pentatonics, minor blues, these kind of scales. So it's important that we know major scales. It's a foundation for everything. Again, I know that this video covered a lot of information. I encourage you to go back and watch sections of it over and over again. Go to guitaranimal.com and check out our looper function. You can loop each one of these. It may take a couple weeks for you to go through this entire video and understand it, and that's perfectly all right. It's just there was a certain amount of information I had to get to you guys and present it, and I knew that it was going to be difficult to grasp in one video. That's why we have the loop points. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you at guitaranimal.com.